Present.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I would like to quickly introduce our new secretary, Erin Roseman, who just called the meeting to order. She was appointed the Director of Finance in March, Director of Finance of Oakland in March. She comes from the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Authority, where she was the Chief Financial Officer. And prior to that, for 11 years, she was the Assistant Director of Finance for Arlington, Texas. And she tells me that she's returning home. Now, Erin, what I was not clear about, were you born in Oakland?
Yes, I was.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So Erin Roseman is now the secretary to the authority.
Hey, welcome.
Thank
Welcome. We have item 2A. Let's welcome and introduce our new board members, Carl Chan and George Casson Jr. Carl's not with us, but many of us know Carl with the Chinatown Chamber of Commerce. So when Carl joins us for a future meeting, we'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself. But let's have George introduce himself. You know, his dad with Pioneer, Oakland, and Peerless Coffee, and here at the Coliseum, the arena. So he's stepped in dad's footsteps. So George, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm George. Thank you very much. It's an honor to serve on this commission. I am third generation owner, CEO of Peerless Coffee and Tea. We're celebrating our 98th year in business and our 98th year in the city of Oakland. We're in our second location, but we're very proud of that. And as we're just 2 years away from our centennial, we're looking to have a fun time celebrating both 100 years of business and 100 years in Oakland. As the chair mentioned, my dad was involved in the Coliseum a number of years ago, so I spent enormous amount of time at the Coliseum. It is very near and dear to me. Season ticket holders to the A's since the 70s, and we were with the Raiders and the Warriors. So I'm just very honored to serve with all of you. Thank you.
Your dad was one of the pioneers, because he was involved with this back in the 1980s and 90s?
Yes, yeah, for a long, long time. He was chair of what was then the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum, Inc. Before 1995, when we issued the debt and restructured the governorship of the authority. Now, for full disclosure, I have to let you know that I was very close to George's dad, and he was very much my mentor. But I had nothing to do with this nomination to this.
Yeah, I can explain that. So, as everyone probably knows, the county is selling its interest in the right and interest in the property, and the A's have purchased that. But it's a 7-year payment plan. They've paid the first installment. So until the A's pay off their entire amount, the county continues to have an obligation here. But as part of that agreement, the A's get to nominate some folks to go on to the JPA, two representatives. And so after a lengthy process of various people being submitted, Mr. Casson and Mr. Chan were approved by the Board of Supervisors to be the representatives from the A's to be here on this body. And that's how that process went. And then speaking of that, I just want to mention, in full disclosure, like Henry said, I just want to say that with Carl and George coming on, I know they're both longtime familiar with Oakland and their involvement, and their reputations precede them. But here at the JPA, I'm personally going to miss Council Member Larry Reed, Supervisor Scott Haggerty, former Council Member Ignacio De La Fuente, and former County Assistant Administrator Donna Linton, because collectively, with the four of them on this JPA, they probably had close to 80 to 100 years of experience.
That's true.
Yeah. So Henry can attest to that. Definitely can attest to that. So I'm not putting any pressure on George and Carl, and David. No pressure. But I just want you to know, Triva can at least talk to her dad, but you three, you're gonna have to run on your own. So we're gonna be expecting a lot of you. All right. Okay.
Thanks, Nate. I appreciate that. All you have to do is say, "Don't screw it up now."
Okay. So let's have the approval of the minutes.
Okay, next we'll call for the approval of the minutes.
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes from the meeting before.
So that is
Second?
a motion from Commissioner Harbert and a second from Commissioner Kaplan. Would you like to?
Any speakers? Do we have any speakers on anybody on the minutes? From the public?
I'm not sure how to tell.
If they have any raise their hands.
Oh,
There's a hand raised in the attendees side. Zenny Abraham?
Yep, that's yeah, thank you very much. I believe we were able to start and unmute. Outstanding. Yeah. First of all, Aaron, I want to say welcome as a Feral Maverick. I'm from UTA, class of 1985. Welcome. Additionally, and I want to encourage, as we move forward, that we consider the problem of the long-term growth of the authority. It's something that was alluded to later, but I want to congratulate everybody for making it through, because there's a lot of work to do, and I'm going to get to that in another part, but I think you all ought to be congratulated for the work that you've done. I know you get beaten up a lot. It's not intentional. Oh, and by the way, George, it's been a hell of a long time, man. I miss your dad so much, and I miss having Canadian Club with him. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Zenny. It's great to see you.
Thank you, everybody.
And any other public speakers? If there are no other public speakers, you have to take the roll, Aaron.
Okay.
There was a motion. It was made by Halbert, seconded by, was it Kaplan?
Kaplan, yes.
Right. So,
Okay. I'll take the roll vote. Chair Nate Miley,
aye.
Vice Chair Kaplan,
Aye.
Commissioner Triva Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner David Harbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Kristen Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner George Fakasi.
Aye.
The motion passes with 6 ayes.
Right, thank you.
The next item, are we moving to item 6 or are we? Okay.
Yeah, let's move to item 6. As requested that we do item 6 now.
Then to item 6, new business, we will hear a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of the arena concession license agreement with Levy Premium Food Services Limited Partnership Management and operation of all food and beverage services at the Oakland Alameda County Arena.
Mr. Chair, before the motion is called to approve that item, I'd like to give some quick background for how we got here. We heard from the union representatives on a number of occasions when the contract with Levy Premium Services expired in November of 2020. And the concern was that with the expiration of that contract, the union employees had raised questions about their continuing health benefits and some seniority rights and other benefits and rights that they had under the previous agreement. And the board was urged to either enter into a new contract at that time, or it was also put on the table that the board might consider taking on the former employees as authority employees so that they would have an employer or picking up their health coverage. And the board turned down all of those and instead appointed a committee of Commissioner Kristen Hill and Ignacio de la Fuente and me to meet with Levy and come up with a new contract. And we started that process around February of this year. We consulted with the Bigelow companies whom we had hired to assist us with a request for proposals in case the discussions with Levy were not productive. And so we have consulted with the Bigelow companies, Chris Bigelow, the principal, throughout this process. We have reached an agreement with Levy for a 4-year term. And I want to say a word about that because when we started these discussions with them, we were looking actually for a short-term agreement. After several rounds of discussion, we were convinced that given the investment that Levy or any other firm would have to make, that anything short of 4 years was not going to be economically viable. And so for that reason, we are recommending a 4-year term. We have attached the concession rates to this term sheet. And those concession rates are a modification of what we had from our Sixth Amendment. Again, with the concession rates modifications, we consulted with Bigelow Company to assist us in whether or not that was a reasonable commission tier rate, and they agreed that it was. We have agreed also to assume not to exceed $75,000 for the purpose of making repairs and for cleaning costs and for making their point of sale compliant with state law. The commencement date is yet to be determined because we need more definitive information, guidance and direction from the state and or the county health officer. Once we have that and we can open the doors of the arena, we will commence that service. Also, there's the issue of what happens if we start this and in the middle, whatever the middle is, we have to shut down again. We're recommending that that be considered an interim term. And that will allow us, even with limited activity at the arena, we will have food service, which will be required since we will not allow people to bring food and beverages into the facility. Once we are fully operational, and we said that when we are authorized to have at least 50% capacity or greater, then the regular term would commence. There is still the open question, and right now I don't have a good answer for it. And once we have resolved that, I'll inform the board. And that is during the interim period, we had recommended that the tier structure should be what's in that attachment for the first year. In fairness, that may not work for the provider if there are only a very few events with limited capacity during the arena. So once the interim period is over, we will have to revisit what is a fair and equitable commission rate. That summarizes the term sheet. We will be finalizing the language. We're asking for authorization for me to execute the agreement subject to the term sheet. If there are any material changes in that, of course, we'll have to bring that back for your approval. And I recommend approval of the resolution on the agenda. I think it's listed as item 6A.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. I want to thank Kristen and Ignacio for the work they did with you on this. Kristen, do you want to add anything to this report before we have a motion?
Yes, I'll just add that, of course, as usual, Mr. Gardner did an excellent job in leading these discussions and making sure that we were, serving the public interest well, and relying on our consultant who made sure that we were, it's a challenging thing to negotiate a deal at this time with a lot of uncertainty that still remains. But I think that we really did the best that we could under the circumstances. And I do think that this is, I certainly agree with Mr. Gardner in recommending this deal, because I do think that it's very favorable and very reasonable, certainly under the circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Any commissioners have any questions, comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask, when do you expect that we would be able to be using the arena again?
We are looking at the possibility of an event as early as sometime in June, but more likely not until July.
Okay, so the potential event in August that was discussed previously regarding the Commissioner's Cup could be an option, but we don't have confirmation yet?
I think that's true. If Nicole Strange, the general manager of ASM, is on, she can respond to that. And if not, when she does come on, we can come back to that question.
Excellent. Oh, I do see her on.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yes, with the governor saying this ominous date of June 15th, everything is open. We are looking for events to come back after that time. Of course, there's some fine print that needs to be ironed out of what that actually means. If it's 100% capacity with social distancing and masks, there's still some stuff to be figured out, but that is definitely a viable option in August for the Commissioner's Cup.
Great, and I want to say I appreciate the board members who negotiated this, and I'm prepared to support this. And I just want to encourage us as we look toward the reopening to be thoughtful about that many people still are not vaccinated and children still don't have access to the vaccine. So as we work to reopen, I really want to encourage us to be cautious and thoughtful about capacity, masking, other things we can do to make sure to continue to prevent the spread of COVID, given how very much work we've all put in to trying to remedy it and vaccinate and stop the spread, that we don't want to then become a source of spread. But I appreciate this and happy to support the item. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments? So before we have the motion, any public comments on this item?
None.
Aaron?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, but
No.
so then no public comment. So we're ready to take the vote.
If we can have a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Kaplan, seconded by,
Second.
I'm sorry, who was that?
we have multiple seconds. I'll go with Kristen. So move Kaplan, seconded by Kristen.
Thank you.
With that, I'll take the roll call vote. Chair Nate Miley,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kaplan,
Aye.
Commissioner Treva Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner David Halbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Christian Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner George Bukowski.
Aye.
6 ayes, the motion passes.
So we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to open forum. We'll see if there are any speakers on the open forum. You give each speaker 3 minutes. Including the open forum speakers.
Hand raised. Yes, there's Zinni Abraham. 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. There is a critical crisis I want to bring to the board's collective attention, and it has to do with something that first occurred with the flooding of the bathrooms at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum at the stadium. It was mischaracterized as occurring because the bathrooms were 22 feet below sea level. That wasn't the reason. It was rising groundwater. And now, and if you talk to our mutual friend Zach Wasserman about this at length, he will tell you that by 19 years or 18 years, we have an additional 72 inches of water to deal with. And that's just not the Coliseum. That's I-880 and all the way down to the airport. So I'm encouraging the organization to fashion a plan, a multi-agency plan to deal with this now and finance it while we have access to at least some portion of a $4 trillion infrastructure bill, and then make that a marketing tool to pass that bill. This is critical to the future of East Oakland. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Is there any other public comments? Anybody else, Aaron?
Sorry, I was muted. I don't see any additional hands raised.
All right. So we'll move into item 5.
Item 5 are reports from the executive director. The first report being FEMA OES vaccination operations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As all of you know, we have been working with FEMA and Cal Office of Emergency Services and California Department of General Services for mass vaccinations at the Coliseum site since mid-February. However, prior to that, and prior to the governor making the announcement that that site had been designated by the federal government as one of only 2 at the time, we had already received several requests from medical providers to use the site. And it seemed like every other day we were getting a request. One from Kaiser, then from Sutter, and then one from a medical provider in East County, and I can't remember who that was. And it was that point we said, well, no, this needs to be better coordinated. And we started working with the county's incident management team to figure out the logistics of how we would accommodate this and have some order to it. After having a series of meetings to figure out how best to make that work, the governor then made the announcement that the site had been designated by the federal government. And at that point, then we had Cal OES and Department of General Services and FEMA all working together with ASM management team and with me and with the mass vaccination task force, which we had set up actually in late January.
Hang on a second. There's too many people with their sound on and we're getting an echo. If those who are not speaking currently could mute themselves, or if the host could mute the folks who are not speaking, then the sound will be easier. Thank you.
Thank you. And so then, in mid-February, the governor announced that this site had been designated. And so then we have several major additional participants in figuring all of this out. The operation was started in mid-February, and it was announced initially that it was going to end in April, and then that was extended to May 9th. And on May 10th, then the county, this was handed over to the county to be responsible for the remaining vaccinations at the site. At its busiest point, there were 1,000 people working out there at Coliseum, and that was most of the time, from mid-February actually up until probably late April, maybe even early May. So it was a beehive of activity and a very complex operation. When we were approached about the use of the site, we negotiated with the Department of General Services and said, well, but although we have limited activity at the site, if you take over essentially the entire parking lot, we won't be able to do anything during that period. And so we need to talk rent. And they did agree to 2 major conditions. One is to pay us $100,000 a month while they're on the site. And that started mid-February, and right now it's expected to go until about May 26 or so. And in fact, it goes as long as they're still out there with anything on that site. But they expect to be off the site by May 26. I said in the report that at the time of this writing that nearly 450,000 people have been vaccinated. Well, that's an underestimate. I was told just yesterday that it's more like approaching 500,000 that will have been vaccinated by sometime this evening. And they will be continuing again until May 23rd. So we will exceed that amount. That does not include, as I understand it, that doesn't include the number of people who are vaccinated at the mobile sites. Allen Temple, Expo, Gospel, True Vine Ministries, and other community-based organizations where vaccinations have taken place. So the number is probably greater than that. We are prepared now to accommodate, once we get the green light, most activities, certainly at the parking lot and in the stadium. The arena is going to, and was always going to be, more challenging because it's an indoor venue. And I'll keep the board posted about when we get word that we can start activities there. But activities in the stadium, depending upon the size and the practicality of it, will probably go ahead of anything in the arena. The A's had their opening game, I think, on April 1st, and that all went very smoothly, and it has gone smoothly ever since. That was with a cap of 11,000 fans. They may soon be given permission to increase that rather substantially. And if they are, we can accommodate that, and especially once the vaccination operation is off the site, then we can accommodate whatever the state or the county health officer allows. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. It has been quite a ride and an enormously complex operation. And thanks to the good work of our county health department, Cal OES, Department of General Services, and FEMA, a very successful collaborative effort.
Yeah, let me just jump in here. And we also want to have Kaplan and Reed give us a report from the vaccine task force that we had, because I know they had a number of meetings around that. But just want to add that at the site at one point at its peak was dispensing 8,000 doses a day. The target was 6,000. By the time the county took over full operation on May the 10th, it was maybe down to 4,000 doses a day. And then overnight, it went to like 400 a day. And that's one of the big reasons why we decided on May 23rd, we'd be shutting down the site, just because it was being totally underutilized. And this wasn't a phenomenon just in Alameda County. That was being seen at other mega sites as well. So I just want to add that to Mr. Gardner's report. So before we see if any questions on his report, Commissioner Kaplan and Reed, do you want to talk about the vaccine task force and your observations about that and how that went?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. It has been an incredible honor to serve you all as your chair of the vaccine task force, and I so appreciate all of the incredible work that went into it. I think we shouldn't let that number that Henry Gardner shared go by without comment. 500,000 people vaccinated, and to take into account, given what we know about the trajectory of the disease and what % of the population you need to have vaccinated to reduce community spread, that I think it would be safe to say that the work we did to get this site open for vaccination changed the curve of the progress of the disease in our county and our region. That the sheer number of people that we got vaccinated much more quickly than would otherwise have happened has made a real difference and saved lives. So I want to thank all of you, because at our first meeting in January, that was my first day and Councilmember Treva Reed's first day on this board term, we launched this effort, and we got the state and feds involved. And of course, the county and county health put in huge amount of work to this. And then the other comment that I wanted to make is that the work with the community-based organizations, the work we did to explain to state and federal leaders the importance of working effectively with local churches and other community organizations, and the mobilization of the trucks out to those sites to do vaccinations in the community was an incredible success, to the point that the leadership of Cal OES said that that was their role model. What they learned here was their role model for what they're taking throughout the state and even throughout the nation, in terms of making sure that our African American community and our Latino community and low-income communities are not excluded from vaccination and have that access. So I think this has been an incredible use of this large public facility, and may we continue to go forward in ways that benefit our community. And it's been a pleasure working with all of you to make that happen. And I do agree with the conclusion that, given how many people have been vaccinated now, that there isn't a need to continue beyond the planned date for this large scale site, and that the county is ramping up more of the small and medium sized community based sites. So I want to say that transition is the right choice given where we're at with the numbers, and everybody should be very proud of what's been achieved here. Thank you.
Commissioner Reed.
I believe Commissioner Reed has departed the meeting.
All right. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments on this aspect of Mr. Gardner's report and the report from the Mass Vaccine Task Force?
Of other reports. That's at the morning Coliseum.
Mr. Chair, if there are none, I do want to call out Colleen Chola, who is the head of the health department at the county, who worked with us, it seemed like 24/7 in the early period, trying to get all of this organized, and then supported by Dr. Kathleen Clannon, who just, the two of them, put enormous amount of time and effort in making sure that we were achieving what we set out to do. The other thing I would say about the task force really was laser-like on trying to ensure that people in underserved communities had access to the vaccine. And I think we can all be very proud of the accomplishments there. That work is not yet completed. The county is on it. We know that we need to reach a little bit further, a little bit deeper in some of these communities. But I think we have performed, we're in the A group in terms of performance in that category. But I want to call out the work of the county staff, and I just called out two people, a lot of people from the county involved in this from the earliest days. That was long before the county took over single-handedly almost now this operation. And so want to make sure that that is on the record.
Sign that. And let me just add, the Board of Supervisors, we get weekly briefings on COVID, twice a week briefings. And Colleen Shawa, who actually is the head of our healthcare services agency, it's a $1 billion agency. Their budget's $1 billion. She's got about 1,700 employees. And the public health department is under her auspices. So Kimmy Watt was out there, Nika was out there, and I was at the site at least on 2 occasions. And I want to thank Nicole for all of her work with Mr. Gardner on this as well. So a lot of people helped to make this the site operationally effective. And definitely the Mass Vaccine Task Force stayed on top of trying to ensure that underserved communities, people of color, were receiving a vaccine. As Commissioner Kaplan pointed out, the county will be pursuing mobile clinics, community pods. We have a community pod set up at Allen Temple. We'll be doing pop-ups. We might do a pop-up at the Coliseum BART station. So instead of trying to have people come to us as part of the big strategy with the mega sites, a lot of the work now is going to be focused on going to people and trying to get needles and arms into people that either were hesitant or that there were barriers for one reason or another. It could be language, it could be location, it could be access, it could be any number of reasons, vaccine hesitancy, but trying to get to those folks. So that's going to be the strategy going forward. And even though things are better, I think as Commissioner Kaplan pointed out, we are not out of this pandemic yet. Even on June 15th, when the governor, if he moves ahead and opens everything up, we're still not out of it. We still need to practice all this necessary protocols. Hopefully everybody on this call has been vaccinated. But even if we're vaccinated, keep in mind, until the entire world internationally is vaccinated and we conquer this pandemic, we are not out of the woods yet. And we're not out of the woods yet. So we just got to keep that in mind, even though things are getting better, maybe in our area, in our state, in our nation. We're not out of the woods until everybody in the whole world can say that the commission has been lifted. So let's see if we have any questions on this piece of the report before we go to the rest of the report that Mr. Gardner has. Any public comments on this from anybody? Aaron?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. So, Mr. Gardner, you want to go on to the rest of your report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the third quarter budget report. We committed to provide you with quarterly reports at the time that we adopted the budget last June, knowing that this fiscal year was going to be a challenge. And there are no surprises. It has truly been a challenge because the way we are able to sustain the operations is through event revenues. And of course, there have been very, very few with very limited revenue results. And so at this point, at the end of the third quarter, the challenge notwithstanding, we expect to end the quarter in a balanced position and maybe with a small surplus. But at a minimum, we fully expect to close the fiscal year balanced. The few events that we've been able to host, along with the A's, have produced the revenues that I will speak to in a minute. We've had no activity in the arena for obvious reasons. The last event in the arena was in late February or early March of 2020. I already pointed out the unexpected revenues that we have of $100,000 a month from Cal OES, and that's going to probably cover about maybe 3.5 months as that lease agreement terminates the 23rd of May. We are where we are largely because of the excellent work that Nicole Strange, the general manager of ASM, and her staff have been able to accomplish during this very challenging period. They have tightly controlled the expenditures, and that's the only thing that we really can control since we can't control revenues. And they have been really on top of that in every respect of the way. We adopted the budget in June, right at $37 million, and that's about that same amount, of course, to be balanced for both revenues and expenditures. The revenues at the end of the third quarter are around $32.6 million, which represents 88% of the budget at this time of the year. So that's 88% of revenues at 75% of the year. Now, these are not straight line projections or results, as we know, because not everything comes in evenly 1/12 every month. But what pushes that number up to 88% is that we have these one-time payments, which are substantial, from the city and the county of approximately $20.7 million. And those have already been paid. Likewise, the Warriors payment of $9 million has already been paid. So that's one of the reasons that we're 88% of the revenues is 75% of the budget. Of course, that trend won't continue through the final quarter, again, because those are one-time payments and they've already been received. On the expenditure side, there's a correction that I need to make. We have spent at the end of the third quarter approximately $31 million. And that $31 million represents 85% of the budget at 75% of the year. And what drives that, of course, is that we have already made the payments on the debt service. So balancing all of that out, I am very confident that we will end the fiscal year balanced. The Coliseum operations is the next largest category of expenditures. And at 75% of the year, they're at 69% of budget. And that's good management, fiscal control on the part of ASM. Our administration costs are about 75% to date, and our legal expenses are only 11%. When we adopted the budget, we weren't sure what more would have to happen with some of the litigation that we're involved in. The major litigation has been closed. And so the legal expenses are not going to be much more than 15% of what we had budgeted, if that much. And again, the administration costs are substantially below the 75% of the time of the fiscal year. So all things considered, all balanced on the revenue and expenditure side, we're looking at a modest surplus at the end of the fiscal year. I did include a table with this report. I've summarized what's in that table, but if you have any questions regarding any of the numbers in that spreadsheet, I'll be happy to respond to those. That is my report regarding the third quarter budget.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions or comments?
I do not see any hands raised, Chair.
Anybody from the public have any questions or comments?
No hands raised there either.
Okay, these are informational reports. So thank you, Mr. Gardner. Do an excellent job. You and your large, enormous staff.
From our treasurer, auditor, Melissa Wilk, and the assistant controller, Craig Boyer. Melissa, do not send us a bill. I'm in constant contact with them, going over these numbers. And they're the ones who generate this information. I just take it and summarize it and say, okay, here's how it stacks up. They are on top of the dollars. I tell you, they're on top of it. And then we have the very able assistance from Aki. Aki, I saw, is in our meeting from the county. That's donated service. And Betsy Lake, who was not able to join us today, also from the city of Oakland. That's the team. But those people I just called out, that's volunteer work. But I worked them. And we could not, there is no way we could manage this without those contributions. So I'm glad you talked about the staff. Thank you, Mr.
All righty. So if there are no other comments or questions from Mr. Gardner on his report, this is just informational. I see on the agenda that there's no report from SMG, but I would like for Nicole just to talk a little bit about what she foresees for the immediate future, because I know Commissioner Halbert and I sat down with Nicole. Nicole's now the person in charge here locally. Chris Wright is now in Las Vegas, but Nicole obviously can talk with Chris, because we met with Chris, we met with Nicole, and we met with David. And I can't remember David's last name and his position with SMG, but Commissioner Halbert and I had a meeting with them, and we wanted to also acquaint Commissioner Halbert with the facility, so we took him on a little tour as well. But Nicole gave me an idea of what we're projecting maybe for the summer and leading into the fall. I think it might be good for the commissioners and the public to hear this.
Mr. Chair, Nicole is on the agenda as 5B.
Yeah, but it said no report.
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, great. Okay, I misread it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nicole.
Good morning. A little event activity update, an added event for September 17th of this year, 2021, Pepe Aguilar. A couple postponed events. The two Rage Against the Machine events will be postponed to April 26th and April 28th, 2022, respectively. My Chemical Romance will be postponed to October 5th, 2022. And a canceled show is A.R. Rahman. Some other events I wanted to bring to your attention that have been happening on property, just to make you aware, OPD, ACSO, OFD, BART PD have continued ongoing trainings on site. They work with us if we have availability in our parking lots, in the stadium, in the arena, to have ongoing training. So that is happening, I would say, weekly. We had a Verizon commercial shoot on April 12th. So Verizon filmed 3 scenes for an upcoming television commercial in the stadium on Monday, April 12th. The production involved a 12-hour set construction day on the 11th, followed by approximately 100 people on site over 10 hours for the film shoot. We worked closely with the production team to ensure that all state and local COVID-19 requirements and best practices were being met, which included testing of all staff prior to working and proper documentation for contact tracing. The production team used by Verizon is currently in discussion with us to return for a separate commercial shoot this fall. Moving on, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Day on May 8th. Local supporters gathered in Malibu Lot for John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Day, which promotes awareness and support for the similarly named act passed by the House of Representatives. The group organized a 9-mile votercade for decorated vehicles to drive as a group in the area to spread awareness. The use of Malibu Lot served as a location for the event participants and volunteers to meet and decorate cars prior to the votercade, and a place to convene briefly after. Approximately 100 vehicles participated in the event. California Nurses Association Vigil on May 12th. The California Nurses Association National Day of Remembrance event on May 12th was a drive-in event held in C-Lot. Similar events were held across the country as a vigil for nurses and healthcare workers that have passed away due to COVID-19. Roughly 75 vehicles attended the 2-hour event, and multiple Bay Area news outlets were on site to cover the event. This was the second California Nurses Association event on site this year, and we hope to work with them again in the future. Alameda County EMS Agency Booster Seat Giveaway, May 15th. The event's purpose is to raise awareness on the importance of having children in a safe booster seat until they are big enough to go without. This year's event was a scaled down version of the one we've had in years prior to the pandemic. People signed up, had to go through an online training on booster seats and how to safely install them in place. Roughly 250 booster seats were distributed to Bay Area families in C-Lot. The event was a huge success. And we've already went over the mass vaccination site, which is closing on Sunday. There will be a demobilization period starting on Monday to remove all of the tents and patch and repair all of the asphalt damage that has happened in the north parking lots. And that concludes my report.
Nicole, before you finish, could you also mention the fact that it's projected that we will be starting some concerts this summer, this fall. We'll be building an outdoor stage. And that stage will be there at least for a temporary stage for a period of time, so that it could be utilized for other types of activities as well. Are you at liberty or comfortable talking about that?
I can talk about that broadly. We're in discussions with a promoter to have essentially a third facility temporarily built in our south parking lot in C lot, where we will host outdoor concerts approximately September through December, which would be extremely exciting. Our first arena show slated is Celine Dion, September 4th. I will tell you, we're in talks with many different promoters on a variety of shows as early as early July. So as those get firmed up, I will definitely report back to this group.
And I just want everyone to recognize that, last year we were really pushing Mr. Gardner and Nicole and others to activate the site. The site was activated. We did flu shots there. It was a site for voting, testing, then the big mega site for vaccination, and then the many activities that Nicole's pointed out just recently. So the site, despite the pandemic, had been, was activated. It took a while to kind of get to that place, because obviously with the pandemic, none of us knew how to proceed last year between March and let's say the summer, but things moved along, and I think the JPA and working with AEG, SMG now really did a good job of getting things activated there. And then the other piece is we should be in a good competitive position for concerts, because I've been informed, as long as we have SMG has that relationship with Live Nation, we should be in a good competitive position for concerts, despite San Francisco in the facility in San Jose. So and there's a rationale behind that as well. So we're looking forward to once we can get underway, having things begin to ramp up slowly but surely. So any commissioners have any questions or questions of Nicole, or any other comments?
I do not see any hands raised by any of the commissioners.
And any speakers from the public?
Yes, there's one speaker,
Okay.
Mr. Zinni Abraham.
Thank you very much.
3 minutes.
In
You
the
may speak
previous,
and unmute yourself for 3 minutes.
that would work, wouldn't it? Thank you very much. In previous meeting, we discussed, Ms. Strange, the air filtration, and so through the chair, Supervisor Miley, can we get some update as to where that is? You said you're going to dig in more and provide a more detailed report.
I don't know if Ms. Strange is still on.
Yeah, I'm looking right at her.
Yes, she's there. I can respond briefly, and then we can prepare a more thorough response for our next meeting. This is something that we did pursue, and we tried to see if there was any funds available through the first stimulus package, the CARE package, that would fund this improvement. And when we did that, all the money was spent, was gone through the city and the county. None of that was available. We also said that we would pursue this through the air district. I haven't gotten a response, and I'll need Nicole's help in the next week or so to follow up on that again. There is a slim possibility there might be some fun add to that.
Thank you. Can I ask how much money you need by chance? Is that out of school for me to ask?
Well, not at all. To the extent that we have some idea, no, it'd be quite. We're a public agency.
I know some people get a little wiggy, Henry.
I can jump in here and address that. So first, speaking about the stadium, the filters in the stadium have all been upgraded and changed to MLB standards. So just want to give you an update on that. And then for the arena, respectively, there are many different kind of filters and filtration systems, as I'm sure you're aware of, which range from expensive to more expensive. There is a certain type of filter, a charcoal filter, which approximately would be $12,000 for replacing our in-arena filtration system. We're looking into all different options, all aspects. Obviously, we still have a little bit of time before our first show, but we're looking into all options and obviously their price range.
Thank you.
And we'll come back with a more definitive response as we get more information, Zenny. Thank you for raising the question.
Sure, and I'll provide some help to you because it sounds like you might be a little back help. So I'll help you out.
Chair, I do not see any additional hands raised.
Okay. Nicole and Henry, if with the Air District, if for some reason you don't hear back from them or whatever, which is kind of weird, let me know because both Howard and myself are directors at the Air District. So it's kind of interesting they haven't responded, but they should. And I'm not trying to put any pressure on them in terms of what they respond, but the point is they should respond.
And that may be more on me than on them.
All right. Anybody else have is there any other public comments?
I do not see any other hands raised for this item.
Okay. So unless any other commissioners have questions or comments on the reports we've heard today from Mr. Gardner or Ms. Strange, we are done with item 5A and B.
That would take us to item 7, closed session, and there are no items for closed session on this agenda.
Right. Okay, good. So hearing nothing else, we've had open public comment. So I'm going to adjourn today's meeting, and we will meet again in June, the third Friday of the month. And I think I want to mention that we want to extend our condolences and sympathy to Mr. Gardner. You know, his older sister passed away last month in April. And that's one reason we had to cancel the meeting in April. And I've heard a lot about his older sister. If you think Henry's a, top notch, hey, from what I heard about his older sister, oh boy, man, she was off the scale in terms of being top notch. So Henry, we send our condolences to you and your family.
Very much. Thank you. And to Commissioner Vukasin, it is 9:30. You see how efficient our chair is. It's just like a television program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I want to appreciate Chair Miley for his great leadership and our smooth meeting, and join him in our appreciation for Henry Gardner and in honor of the life, Mr. Gardner, of your sister, as we adjourn with that honor. And thank you to everyone who's been putting in all this incredibly hard work in the face of the pandemic and everything else we've been dealing with. And thank you, Zenny, for joining us today and sharing some great useful insights. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks. And I can't wait for us all to be able to get back together and meet in person because I miss breakfasts in our closed sessions. That's what takes us so long, George. Everybody's got to eat before we can start our closed session. Yeah. All right. Everybody take care. Stay safe. Be well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So, folks, that ends the meeting, and I want to get to some of your statements here because that meeting is over. Looks like the viewers have left, but I want to nonetheless get this recorded, and where Mohammed had said, "Where is this task force?" when the Raiders drama was going on. It's not a task force. The Oakland Alameda County Coliseum Joint Powers Authority is the replacement organization to the board of directors of the Oakland Coliseum complex. And George Hukasin Jr.'s dad was the president of that board. In order to engineer the return of the Raiders, to Oakland from Los Angeles, the city of Oakland fashioned, as you should be aware, a bond issue that called for the sale of $83 million worth of personal seat licenses, as per a concept that was developed by Mark Gannis of Sports Corp. In order to float those bonds by law, what we had to do as a city in conjunction with the county is establish a whole new organization. We established a Joint Powers Authority. Why? So that from a perspective of a bond underwriter, we had access to the full faith and credit of the county of Alameda, not just the city of Oakland. And you'd say, why do that? It provides for a bond that, in the interest of an investor, that bond is more robust, more likely to pay its bills, its yields, its debt service on a regular basis with the interest that's attached to that debt service, whatever that is, okay? So in order to do that, we had to establish a whole new organization, and we chose to do so from what was the Coliseum board. And in the politics of that, George Fucasan Jr.'s dad got moved out of the way by Ignacio de la Fuente. And it was a power play on Ignacio's part that George's dad never got over. And I don't blame him. It wasn't Ignacio's finest hour, okay? But he did it because he said it's our money now. And of course, he became the first chairman of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum Joint Powers Authority. They did Ignacio. That is the organization of which today you've been watching the activities of. All right, it's not a task force. It's been around all the time. Okay. Now, as to where it was, it's important for you to note that prior to this changeover, the Coliseum board and the Coliseum had a more robust organization where George Fucasan, as president, was serving in a private capacity. He wasn't paid. Henry Gardner was paid. Okay. And Henry Gardner's paid. And George Fucasan Sr. was president of Pre-Earth's Coffee and a great man. Also on the board were Mary Warren as well. It's a local business consultant, to name among others. And I will think they should be celebrated. I will do that in a separate video because people should know about their histories. Even though they are in our past, they are always, by their actions, part of our present. Anyway, that board, that organization had a bigger staff at the stadium. Bob DiCarlo was the actual president of the Coliseum, okay? And, Bob Quintella. Bob DiCarlo was his assistant. And when I walked in to visit in 1996 representing Oakland Mayor Elihu Harris, Bob had a gigantic map laid out, and he could point to land that he wanted to acquire within our orbit, of course. What I mean by that is, say, across I-880 or more immediate or across Hagenberger. And he had a 5 to 10 year plan, and he could talk about it, boom, and a budget plan. We don't have that today, and we do need it. This organization is fashioned more around the bond issue, and it has sort of been a kind of accordion, It expanded with volunteer help or paid help, depending on the need of the project or the sports organization. And it's been that way for some decades now, since it was created in 1996. But in terms of a negotiating organization or a retention organization, that talent was never really baked into the JPA. It came depending on who was executive director. And the best executive director we've had from that perspective was Scott McKibben. The best executive director we've had from the perspective of running the JPA with respect to government operations and organizations and interface is the man you're seeing right there at the helm right now. That's Henry Gardner. And for good reason. Henry is the consummate public official. I mean, ideally, we should have had both Scott and Henry working side by side, because Scott knows sports marketing, he knows the business of sports, but he didn't know the internecine business of running an organization, a public organization in California, and all the little pitfalls. Like, for example, Scott's contract called him a consultant. It was right there in black and white, okay? And yet we would hire marketing consultants, and the marketing consultants were always paid a little fee. The Coliseum Joint Powers Authority Board in closed session sent Scott out to be essentially the marketing consultant to find the Ring Central naming rights deal, and he did so. It was $4 million. But Scott believed he was, entitled to ask for a $50,000 fee, and he did so. But the Ring Central people didn't look at it the right way, kicked it back to the city attorney, and rather than the city attorney saying, "Hey, Scott, I think you made a mistake here, because here's this law where you unintentionally crossed over," right? They didn't handle it that way. Instead of handling it in a way that it reflects, "Hey, we like you, we don't want to see you make a mistake," they basically tried to make him look like a criminal. See? Which was really wrong. It was really wrong. Scott, I don't think I'll ever get over that, because it was a unnecessary sullying of his image, and he wasn't helped by some so-called media organizations that had then no idea what they were writing about, and still don't, which is why I started my own. One reason, not that specific issue, of course. But I'll never get over that, because I'm the person that pushed for Scott to get hired, because Scott was at the Rose Bowl as president, had a son in the hospital dying from cancer. He was fighting to save him. His son was up in the Bay Area here, and Scott was just beside himself as to what to do, saw the job opening, and then asked me about it. And I said, "Hey, you'd be great for it." Now, Scott was the man that saved our Super Bowl bid, okay? After then Oakland Mayor Jerry Brown left so early in our meeting with then NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue. So I felt like he was always a friend, and he always had been a friend, and he came to our rescue. He was on my board. I always back and support my friends. I do not believe in spineless behavior. Okay? I think people who engage in that are the worst kind of folks. You stand tall for your friends. You can't do that, you're not a friend. That's just a fact. And when I say stand tall for your friends, you don't encourage your friends to do bad behavior. Of course not. But when you know that they have done something unintentionally wrong, you don't go out of your way to make them look bad. There are a number of people who were supposedly Scott's friends and all this, who were elected officials, who did just that. That was pretty bad. But I digress. This organization has done a lot of great things for Oakland in maintaining the Coliseum. And I've always believed it should be expanded into a sports commission, right? To better serve, I think, the kind of problem that you're pointing to. So there you go, Mohammed. It's not a task force. It is a joint powers authority that is permitted under California law, specifically the California Government Code. I believe the Government Code in the 6000s. In fact, while I have you there and I'm on the internet, you know what I can do? Simply refresh my memory by typing government code, joint powers, California, and see what comes up. Okay. I was right. Let's have a look at that. Okay. So you can see what's called the enabling legislation for joint powers authorities, just so you'll know, where these things come from a legal perspective. It's always important to know the law. Always. All right. Here you are. And there that is. It says Article 1, okay? Joint powers agreements, 65, read that? You see that? 6500 through 6539.6 codes. And whenever a joint powers agreement, let's read that. Let's open that up, shall we? Have a look at it, okay? Because joint powers authorities in California are an animal unto themselves. It reads as follows. This goes all the way back. Look at the date. This goes all the way back to 1943, okay? And all the way back. It authorizes, this is the authorizing the legislation for what's called the Joint Exercise of Powers Act, okay? And it says, all right, and it allows you to form basically an organization that combines the powers of two public agencies, or as used in this article as it reads, public agency includes but is not limited to the federal government, the state, another state or state department's agency, county board of education, county superintendent of schools, city public corporation, public district, regional transportation commission, the state of a state or another state, a federally recognized Indian tribe, or any joint powers authority formed pursuant to this article by any of these agencies. And that was amended in 2011 and effective in 2012. All right. It's called the Joint Exercise of Powers Act. That is what it is called. And again, you would say, why do it in the case of the Coliseum? And the reason why it was done in the case of the Coliseum was simple. The bond issue. The bond issue was floated by the Joint Powers Authority. It wasn't floated by the city of Oakland or the county of Alameda, but they, by the creation of the Joint Powers Authority, and by the way the documents were created, placed essentially their full faith and credit onto the Joint Powers Authority, giving it the ability to float bonds. So that's how all this came about. It's a very creative and unique part of California government. I'm not saying that other organizations in the United States don't do it. They do. They have each one has its different unique set of laws. But this is not a task force. And this is a very powerful organization that's capable of raising its own money and basically issuing its own debt. Okay. All right. So that's where I just want to get that out of the way. All right. That ends this. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. And that ends this broadcast.